Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I have learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I just made the bed, washed my face, brushed my teeth, threw on a hat and a sweatshirt, and I filmed a video with Boo Radley and his new duck for my Peter Does Stuff channel, and I was getting ready to go downstairs and make a cup of coffee, and I was going to vlog. I was actually going to vlog first today because Alex is at brunch, and then he's going to be home after that. And so I was like, if I get my vlog done first, then it can maybe be a little bit longer. I can do it in the living room. Somebody asked me to sit in the chair down there and do it, like sitting behind the plant and stuff like that. So I thought I would do that, and then whatever other videos I get done throughout the day, I get done. Alex could care less if I'm filming. He'll just sit here. Last night, my husband literally binge watched the entire first season of Traitors, like all the way through, from episode 1 all the way to the end. He has just a reunion to watch. I couldn't believe it. So he watched more TV last night than I did. I couldn't believe it. So anyway, so I was getting ready to go downstairs and put Mrs. LaDonna Duck away, and I was like looking through the comments that I had gotten on the last couple Peterisms videos, because I was like, let me see if there is a topic over here to talk about, right? If anybody requested, and quite a few people requested me to talk about some things. One person requested for me to talk about the difference between emotional sobriety and emotional addiction. There's several different definitions of emotional addiction, depending on how you look at that. There's like definitions of like from a mental health point of view. There's definitions inside of like the rooms of recovery and things like that. There's definitions related to the definition of emotional sobriety. If you could let me know in the comment section below what specifically you're talking about, I would love to address that. I love to talk about emotional sobriety. It was actually a term that I didn't really understand until a few years ago, and with going to meetings, sponsorship, and definitely therapy, and as part of that, really helped in the process of me getting to emotional sobriety, which is who are you once you put the drink or the drug down? Like, who are you inside, right? Which is really ultimately the goal of a 12-step program. I think I was like, I don't know, like 14, 15 years sober or something when somebody said to me that the purpose of a 12-step program, which I always thought the purpose of a 12-step program was to stop drinking and using drugs, right? Like, no, I knew that it was about more than that. I knew it was about, you know, like fixing your life and cleaning up the wreckage of your past, but I had never heard it said so succinctly before. And somebody said, I was sitting in a meeting and somebody said, the purpose of working the 12 steps is to find a higher power, turn your life and your will over to your higher power, clean up the wreckage of your past, and live the best life that you can be and be of service. And it was like, oh, that like, without the use of substances, obviously. And I was like, that like so simplifies it to me, you know? And emotional sobriety is like, who are you once, you know, I think we don't talk a lot about this because we talk so much about, and I do, you know, talk about drug histories, alcohol histories, we talk about treatment facilities, things like that, you know, maintenance programs. But one of the things that we don't talk a lot about, I've mentioned it in several videos, but that in any 12-step program, only the first step mentions the substance or the addiction issue, right? The rest of the steps are about what's going on inside. And I was always told, you know, it's not a drinking disease, it's a thinking disease. As far as talking about like substance abuses and things like, or substance abuse and, you know, things like that, as far as the, you know, the substances, I didn't mean substance abuse, the substances that you're using and things like that, right? And I think that one of the things with like people that I've known, friends of mine, things like that, that have ultimately gone back out and started using again, one of the things that I've witnessed is that they like put the drink or the drug down. They go to a lot of meetings for a while, but then they kind of stop. They don't go forward and work the steps. And why I'm such an advocate for a 12-step program, and even though I know that there are a lot of other ways to get sober, you know, I know that, you know, is that it's about the internal work that I did on myself, you know, to take a look at my relationship with my higher power, or did I even have one, or how did I define that to the world around me? Because there's a lot of people that, you know, don't and are agnostic in recovery and things like that. And then it was about, you know, looking, you know, at my past and things like that, cleaning up the wreckage of my past, looking at my resentments, looking at my anger, looking at my conduct, and looking at my part in that, right? And then it was about character defects, and then it was about making amends for all those things that I had done, and that was the cleaning up the wreckage of my past part, you know. And once all of that that was done, then it was like, okay, then who am I today? And that's really what emotional sobriety is, once you've cleaned up all that wreckage, you know? And I've said this in other videos, like, I've been at worse points in sobriety than I was when I was using at points in my sobriety. That was a point where I had no emotional sobriety, you know? I had nothing whatsoever. So I wanted to address that more fully. I think you guys know I am so passionate about talking about addiction and recovery. If you have any specific questions about that, the one thing I don't love to answer is when people will say to me, and I'm totally making the story up because I've gotten in many different ways, is when somebody will say things to me like, my brother or my sister or my wife or my mom or whatever is like, we've confronted her, she's not willing to get help, blah, 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 whatever, we don't know what to do anymore. I mean, those are like questions for professionals. I can share what my experience is by what I've gone through in video, but I think that those are questions where you need to reach out to professionals. And so in any situation where you're dealing with a friend or a family member about addiction issues, I would highly recommend that you get a therapist that is specialized in addiction. I would find a talk counselor, something like that, to talk to. Call a treatment facility for recommendations if you need that. And the other thing I would recommend is like 12-step programs. Like, my camera slid all the way back up. You're sitting on the back of my bed right now, and I know that it bounces up and down, but I'm like trying to be very careful with it, and it like went like that, just swept up. Anyway, what I was saying was, besides seeking professionals, if you're in a situation where you interact regularly with an alcoholic or an addict and you don't know what to do, or they're getting sober and you don't know how to help them, or you don't know what to do or whatever, I always recommend 12-step programs for friends and family members of alcoholics and addicts, much like Al-Anon. But Al-Anon is just one of those programs, that I would really recommend. And also, like, I often think that our attitude is, because I thought this way with my mom, like when I was in high school and stuff like that, that when, like my dad would say, I was in therapy a lot when I was growing up. And my parents were pretty insistent on that. And I can remember my dad would say things to me, like about, and other family members would say things to me about, like, it would be good for you to talk about your mom's drinking, while you're in therapy and stuff. And my attitude was always like, why do I need to talk about my mom's drinking? Like, she needs to go talk about her drinking, which she was. But, like, I was like, that's her issue. Like, that doesn't affect me. The reality was, it did greatly affect me. It greatly affected me, as did the drinking of others around me. And so, the fact that I am still today at 51 years old, in many ways, the way that I operate in the world is that of being an adult child of an alcoholic. And that, I grew up in a chaotic alcoholic home, and I respond to the world as such. I have friends of mine that have been in Al-Anon for 30 or 40 years, and they, like, let's say, because of the person that they were with at the time, and, like, they may have broken up, like, a year later, and they're still in Al-Anon, for the next 29 years or something, like 30 years, because they still respond to the world as somebody that was in a relationship with an alcoholic or an addict. And I think that's important to note, that we define ourselves a lot by who we are in recovery and things like that. So I love to answer any questions about addiction and recovery just based on my personal experience. I think that there's a common philosophy that goes along with working a 12-step program, but like, it's important for me to say this because, I have friends of mine that are sober not by means of 12-step programs. I mean, I want that to be very clear, I have friends of mine that, work, like MAT programs and do not attend 12-step programs but go to counseling. I have friends of mine that are in 12-step programs and are also work MAT programs. I have friends of mine that are, abstinence-based, like, just specifically me, like, that's really, 12-step programs are abstinence-based, just so you know. I think with the induction in the last couple of years of maintenance, withdrawal drugs and things like that, some of that has changed, and there's been a lot more of, like, people looking at it in a different way. I will say this, like, I think one of the saddest things that's happened with maintenance drugs, or, medically treated, like, withdrawal and things like that, is that, because I was around, I worked in the field when all that came around, and I think that what happened when it first came out was that it was seen in a completely different way. Then addicts, like we do, started to abuse it. Okay, started to abuse like Suboxone, which is known as buprenorphine, and things like that. And I mean, I've even known, you know, people that go to court to get the shot, and then they like use through the shot and things like that. And so it wasn't as prevalent back in the day. Now, I mean, you hear about people being on Suboxone all the time. You hear about the street price of Suboxone. You hear about all that kind of stuff, right? But the reality is, there are a lot of people that, yes, are using Suboxone inappropriately, but there are a lot of people that are using Suboxone appropriately through their doctors, things like that, you know? There are a lot of people that are using other things, that are working 12-step programs, that are going to counseling, that are using maintenance drugs to withdrawal long-term over, you know, off their drugs. I've had a lot of friends of mine that have been on, you know, Suboxone for like 2-3 years and finally just like came off of it completely through their doctor while they were going to 12-step programs. And yes, there were people that didn't think they were sober, and there were a lot of people that thought they were, you know? And so, I mean, it's all about like opinion and attitude. Like, I'm like so nervous even having this conversation because I know that this conversation is not going to be popular with some people. I mean, there's going to be some people in 12-step programs who are going to be like, that's not sober. And there are going to be other people that are going to be like, that absolutely is sober. My stance on it is, I do not want one more alcoholic or addict to die, and I will never ask anybody to leave a 12-step program. If you have the desire to be there, you have every right to be there, and that's what our traditions state. Is that all you have to have is a desire? So, you know, for me, and I can remember years ago, my mom went to this very, very small meeting, and I don't know why I'm sharing this story, but oh well. This is not the video I was going to make today. The video I was going to make today was how do you know when a relationship is over? But I started responding to that comment about emotional sobriety, so we'll go into it. So please, to the person that asked about emotional sobriety, put further what you're wanting me to address in the comment section below, because I love talking about this. My mom, it was a couple years before she passed away. She was at this meeting that she went to, and it was a smaller meeting, and most of the people there had a lot of sobriety, like 30, 40 years at that time. And there was this young lady that came in and identified herself, you know, as like an addict and alcoholic, and started talking about, you know, being a heroin addict and stuff like that. And during the meeting, somebody asked her to leave the meeting. They said, you know, this is, you know, a closed meeting and things like that. And so, and somebody else said, no, like, she can stay if she wants to stay, blah, 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 you know, whatever. And this young lady, like, ran out of the meeting, and my mom ran after her, and she said, you have a right to sit in that seat just like anybody else. You've earned your place. And so she talked to the young lady, and the young lady came back in and things like that. And then afterwards, you know, my mom was talking to her about, like, there might be other meetings that, I can sing my mom's praises now. She's passed away, but she would never have told this story. She was sharing it with me because she asked me if I knew meetings that she would feel more comfortable. Well, because this was like, you know, before like HA, Heroin Anonymous, got really famous, and so she was asking me about like NA meetings and things like that in this area. That's why she was telling me the story. But my mom was not somebody that would ever sing her own kindness or her own praises, but I can tell the story now because she's gone. So anyway, she was talking to this young lady, and she said, you know, you're not going to find necessarily what exactly you're looking for here if your main drug of choice was this and this, but you drank very little and things like that. And so, you know, she recommended some meetings to her, and then like would follow up with my mom and kept on talking to my mom. And, you know, my mom found out later that she had like 2 years sober or something like that, and was so excited and whatever, you know, but it's all in how you talk to people. I think that there's so many different things that are going on now, you know, but I just want to make it clear that however you get sober, however you choose to get sober, that's totally on you, you know? Like, a lot of people ask me my opinion. They're like, well, heroin addicts that don't work 12-step. Like, okay, I will be honest with you. Like, I have an issue, and this is outside of Suboxone that is doctor prescribed and that you're supposed to be on it. Like, there are people in 12-step programs that take issue with people being on psychiatric medications. They're like, you're not sober if you're on psychiatric medications. Are you kidding me? Like, seriously? Are you kidding me? That's unbelievable to me, right? I was always taught, and thank God I was surrounded by these people, you know, that as long as you were doctor prescribed something and you needed that, right? So like, if you had this was the example that was always given to me. Like, if you had your wisdom teeth taken out and you were given Vicodin for the pain, that you had somebody else dole out the Vicodin to you, okay, while you were going through the pain, and the second that the pain was gone, they flushed the Vicodin and got rid of it. But that it was fine for you to take the Vicodin. That didn't mean that you had relapsed or lost it, because that was what the doctor was recommending to you, right? And so it's all about motive and intent and talking to your sponsor and things like that. And I've always led with that, you know? And thankfully, I never really had to deal with it until the last couple, years. And in all honesty, I'm so thankful that I didn't have to. But I'm also so thankful that I had my sponsor and my husband and a team of doctors that were educated in addiction around me to help me with that whole situation, But, like people ask me a lot, they're like, well, there's a lot of heroin addicts that say they're sober, but for them, it's just that they quit using heroin and they start smoking pot. And I'm like, well, the death rate on pot is a lot lower than the death rate on heroin. So they can define their sobriety any way they want to. That's not my business to say whether or not they're sober or not. My business is to stay in my lane and do my thing. And if they ask me for help, I help them, But what I will say about that is their chances of dying, okay? Smoking weed is a lot less. Now, if they were coming into a meeting and they were like, well, I'm smoking, weed regularly, but I'm also abstinent in a 12-step program, I'd say, well, no, we preach abstinence, and smoking weed on a regular basis is not abstinent. That doesn't mean you can't come to meetings. Come to meetings, share that you're getting high every day. Get a starter over token every day if you want to. Like, that's your business. I'm not going to ask you to leave or anything like that, but that's not abstinent, right? But I also don't look down on those people. And in all honesty, I've had so many friends of mine that have died from the opioid epidemic and from, heroin and, other opioids and things like that, that I would, if it was putting a needle in their arm, or snorting pills versus smoking weed, what do you think I'd ask them to do? Of course I would, I don't know. I think we live in this world of just constant judgment without understanding of walking in somebody else's shoes. And like my old sponsor that passed away, a year ago said to me, my sponsor I had the most in my life. I said something to him one time. I was asked to sponsor somebody. There was a lot of people at this place that I used to go to that would say that they were on the marijuana maintenance program. And I was asked to sponsor somebody, and this person said to me that they weren't going to quit smoking pot, and they were like, they were there to quit drinking, but they weren't going to stop smoking pot, and they smoked daily, like all day. And I asked my sponsor what he said, and he said, well, I wouldn't sponsor somebody that was actively using any substance. He was like, unless it was doctor prescribed. He's like, because that's not abstinent, and that's what our program preaches. And I said, okay. And I said, well, do you think we should ask them to leave or whatever? This is many, many years ago, right? And he goes, I don't think it's any of your business what they're doing. If they're smoking pot and it's working for them, I don't think that that's abstinence in a 12-step program, okay? But we don't have any place to tell them to leave. Like, that's their business, right? And I learned in that moment very quickly that, like, what other people do with their addiction and their recovery is really none of my business. It's really about me. And what other people say about my addiction and my recovery is really none of my business either. That's on them. I stay sober for myself today, And that's important for me. And other people stay sober for themselves. And how they do that is their business, not mine. I just don't want any more people to die from the disease of addiction. I just don't. It scares me. I've had so many people that have died in my life, and so many people that have come really, really close, and so many people that have just destroyed their life. Friends of mine that have had years of sobriety, whether they just quit and didn't do anything, whether they were going to therapy, whether they got sober through church, or whether they got sober through a 12-step program. I've had friends of mine in every different way. I've had friends of mine living in halfway houses for years on end that got out, and the day they got out, picked up. I mean, after being sober for 2 and 3 years, things that just would break your heart to hear, The pull of addiction is so strong. It is so strong, and it just breaks my heart. And there's my alarm, so that means it's time to get up. So anyway, leave me more comments in the comment section below. There's a video coming about emotional sobriety because I love talking about it. It's something I learned very late in my sobriety, really what it means and what it's about. So please, to the person that left that comment, let me know a little bit more about what you want me to say. And there's also a video about when do you know that a relationship is over, because I got some very wise advice from my dad on that. So I want to make that video as well. And it's just something that I learned in my life that pertains to me. It might not pertain to everybody else. But anyway, I really enjoyed this video today because it wasn't in the direction that I thought it would go at all. So anyway, I love you guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Bye.